Minho wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided the Tayback runner toward the docking bay. The old freighter groaned and shuddered, but she held together like always. Behind him, Hana was already pulling on her work gloves, ready to start repairs the moment they landed. Docking clamps engaged, the station computer announced in its flat voice. Finally, Hana said, stretching her back. I need to check that hydraulic leak before it gets worse. Minho nodded. They had been flying for 3 weeks straight, hauling mining equipment to the outer colonies. The Tayback runner was old, but she was reliable, mostly. The hydraulic system had been acting up for the last few days, and Hana wanted to fix it before they took another long job. Kepler to 7 station was busy as always. Through the viewport, Minho could see dozens of ships from different species. The tall bird-like Kreeth walked on their thin legs, carrying cargo containers. The blob-like molten species rolled along the corridors, their gel bodies shimmering under the station lights. There were others too, species Minho didn't recognize even after 5 years of working in space. Humans were still new to this whole galactic community thing. First contact had happened only 12 years ago, and most aliens still looked at humans like they were strange curiosities. Some were friendly. Others, like the Kreeth, acted like humans were barely worth noticing. Hana grabbed her toolkit and headed for the cargo bay. I'll drain the old fluid and refill the system. Should take about an hour. I'll handle the refueling paperwork, Minho said. Try not to make a mess. Hana laughed. When do I ever make a mess? Minho raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He had known Hana since they were both engineering students back on Earth. She was brilliant with machines. But sometimes she got so focused on fixing things that she forgot to clean up after herself. The cargo bay was cold and smelled like metal and oil. Hana found the hydraulic reservoir and placed a large drain pan underneath it. She opened the valve, and dark liquid started flowing out. It was thick and oily, with a rainbow sheen on its surface. The sharp smell of petroleum filled the air. Hana breathed in deeply, checking the fluid's condition by its smell. It was old, definitely needed changing. She started humming to herself as she worked, completely comfortable in the familiar scent of machinery and oil. Outside in the corridor, Valtic was walking past the Tayback runner's bay. The Kreeth trader was carrying a datapad, reviewing his latest deals. He was thinking about profits and trade routes when the smell hit him. It was like being punched in the face. Valtic staggered backward, his feathers standing on end. His 3 eyes watered instantly. His breathing holes clamped shut automatically, but it was too late. The fumes had already reached him. His stomach twisted, and he felt like he was going to die. Poison! He shrieked, his voice coming out in gasps. Chemical attack! Other aliens in the corridor stopped and turned. Then they smelled it too. A molten named Orn was rolling toward the administration office when the fumes reached him. His gel body started bubbling and churning. He had never felt anything so horrible in his entire life. It was like acid in the air, burning everything it touched. Emergency! Orn's translator crackled. Toxic leak. Seal the bay. Red lights started flashing throughout the station. Alarms blared. Automatic doors slammed shut, sealing off the section where the Tayback runner was docked. Inside the cargo bay, Hana looked up from her work, confused. What's going on? She muttered. Minho's voice came through her communicator. Hana, station security is calling us. They're saying we have a chemical leak. Are you okay? I'm fine, Hana said, looking around. I'm just changing the hydraulic fluid. Why? They're saying it's toxic. They've sealed off our whole section. Hana looked at the drain pan full of old hydraulic oil. This is just regular petroleum-based fluid. It's not toxic. But through the bay door's window, she could see aliens running away from their section. Some were stumbling, others were being helped by friends. A Kreeft was on the ground, gasping for air. Man H.O. arrived in the cargo bay a minute later. He stood next to Hannah and looked at the oil. This is what's causing the problem. I guess so, Hannah said. But I don't understand why. It's just oil. Through the sealed door, they could see Oren approaching, staying as far back as possible. His translator was set to maximum volume. You must dispose of that substance immediately. It is violating 17 different station safety codes. It's just hydraulic fluid, Minho called back. We use it in our systems. That is impossible. Veltik's voice joined in. He was standing even further back, pressed against the far wall. No living being could survive exposure to such toxins. You are lying. Minho and Hannah looked at each other. Then Minho did something that made every alien watching take a step back in horror. He dipped his finger in the oil and held it up. You mean this? He asked. Veltik made a choking sound. Stop. You will kill yourself. But Minho was perfectly fine. He wiped his finger on a rag and shrugged. We've been using petroleum products for hundreds of years. It's normal for us. Hannah nodded. She was standing right over the drain pan, breathing in the fumes that had made Veltik collapse. She looked completely comfortable. Is this really affecting you that badly? She asked. Oren's gel body was rippling with distress. Badly? Badly? That substance would kill most species in this station within hours of exposure. Some would die in minutes. How are you standing there breathing it? Minho was starting to understand. Wait, you're saying that petroleum is toxic to you? Like, seriously toxic? Lethally toxic, Oren confirmed. We have it classified as a Class 7 hazardous material. It requires special containment and disposal protocols. Hannah started laughing. She couldn't help it. We burn this stuff for energy for over 200 years. We still use it in half our machines. It's everywhere on Earth. Your planet must be a death world, Veltik said weakly. He was still pressed against the far wall, looking at Minho and Hannah like they were monsters. Earth is just Earth, Minho said. We evolved there. I guess we evolved to handle petroleum. This is unprecedented, Oren said. His voice had changed from angry to fascinated. No species in the Galactic Council has this tolerance. None. Minho looked at the puddle of hydraulic oil. An idea was forming in his mind. If petroleum was deadly to other species, but normal to humans, that meant something important. That meant there might be places in the galaxy that other species couldn't go. Places rich in oil and gas. Places that humans could work in without any special protection. We need to seal and remove that substance, Oren was saying. I will send a hazmat team with proper equipment. We can do it ourselves, Hannah offered. We're not affected by it. Another long silence from the aliens. You would handle it directly? Veltik asked. Without protection? Sure, Hannah said. She picked up the drain pan, careful not to spill. Where do you want it? Minho watched the aliens scramble to set up a containment area, all of them staying far away from the oil. He thought about all the abandoned worlds listed in the galactic database. Worlds with thick atmospheres of hydrocarbons. Worlds covered in oil seas. Worlds that other species had surveyed and then marked as uninhabitable. Maybe those worlds weren't uninhabitable after all. Maybe they were just uninhabitable for everyone except humans. He smiled. This was going to change everything. The message from the Galactic Council arrived 3 days after the incident at Kepler 7 station. Taiyang read it twice, then looked at Yunji across the laboratory table. They want us to come to the Council medical facility, he said. They want to study us. Yunji raised an eyebrow. Study us? Like lab rats? More like curiosities, Taiyang said. He was a xenobiologist, used to being the one doing the studying. It felt strange to be on the other side. They wanted to understand how humans can tolerate petroleum exposure. When do we leave? Tomorrow. The council medical facility was enormous, floating in orbit around a neutral moon. Taiyang and Junji arrived on a shuttle, along with 5 other human scientists. They were met by Vex, an insectoid representative who clicked and buzzed when he talked. His translator rendered it into flat, precise English. "Welcome," Vex said. "Your species has created quite a stir in the scientific community. We just changed some hydraulic fluid," Junji said. "You survived contact with a Class 7 toxin," Vex corrected. "This is not a small thing." They were led to a large conference room. Inside, dozens of alien scientists waited, representing 20 different species. They all turned to stare at the humans when they entered. Taiyang felt like a zoo animal. A holographic display lit up at the center of the room. It showed a map of known space, with hundreds of planets marked in red. "These worlds," Vex began, "are classified as uninhabitable due to hydrocarbon contamination. Some have petroleum oceans. Others have atmospheres thick with methane and benzene. We have surveyed them for resources, but the cost of extraction is too high. The environmental suits required are extremely expensive, and even with protection, exposure time is limited." Taiyang was starting to understand where this was going. "You believe humans can work on these worlds," he said. "We do not believe," Vex said. "We want to know if it is possible." For the next week, Taiyang and Junji were tested. They breathed air mixed with petroleum vapors. They handled crude oil without gloves. They were exposed to diesel fumes, gasoline, and a dozen other hydrocarbon compounds. Every test was monitored by dozens of alien scientists, all watching from behind thick glass barriers. The results were always the same. The humans were fine. Junji stood in a sealed chamber, breathing air that was 15% petroleum vapor. She felt completely normal. Through the glass, she could see a Kreeth scientist frantically checking the monitoring equipment, convinced it must be broken. "How do you feel?" Vex asked through the intercom. "Fine," Junji said. "A little smell, but nothing bad. That concentration would kill me in 4 minutes," Vex said quietly. Taiyang was in another room, explaining human evolution to a group of scientists. "Earth has natural petroleum seeps," he said. "They've been there for millions of years. Our ancestors lived near them, breathed air contaminated by them. Over time, we developed tolerance. But petroleum is a complex mixture of toxic compounds," one scientist objected. "Benzene, toluene, xylene. These are cellular poisons. To you," Taiyang said. "To us, they're just smells. Unpleasant if concentrated, but not deadly. Our liver enzymes break them down. Our lungs filter them out. We evolved to handle them." On the 5th day, Junji did a demonstration that would be replayed across the galaxy for years to come. She stood in front of the observation window with 3 containers. One held motor oil. One held gasoline. One held diesel fuel. She opened the motor oil first and dipped her hand in. The watching aliens recoiled in horror. Junji pulled her hand out, now coated in black oil, and showed it to the cameras. "This is what we use in our engines," she said calmly. "It lubricates moving parts." She wiped her hand on a cloth, then opened the gasoline. The fumes made several aliens rush out of the observation room. Junji just sniffed it. "This is vehicle fuel," she said. "We burned this for energy for over a century." Finally, the diesel. She poured a small amount onto her palm and let it evaporate. The watching scientists were silent, their translator devices clicking and whirring. "These are common substances on Earth," Junji finished. "We handle them every day. Some humans work in refineries, surrounded by these chemicals for their entire careers." After the demonstration, Taiyang found her in the laboratory, washing her hands with a petroleum-based solvent. An alien janitor passed by, saw what she was using, and made a sound like a scream before running away. "I think we're scaring them," Yunji said. "Good," Taiyang replied. "Maybe they'll start taking us seriously." That evening, they were called to a private meeting. Vex was there, along with a Kreeth they hadn't met before. The Kreeth introduced himself as Kaivan, a representative from a mining corporation. "I have been watching your tests with great interest," Kaivan said. His feathers were sleek and well-groomed, the sign of a wealthy Kreeth. "My company owns survey rights to several hydrocarbon-rich worlds. We have never been able to develop them. The cost is too high. And now you're thinking humans could do it," Taiyang said. "Perhaps." Kaivan pulled up a holographic display. It showed a planet covered in dark oceans. "This is Korath 9. Beautiful, in a way. Also completely lethal to my species. The atmosphere is 30% hydrocarbon vapor. There are oceans of crude oil, natural gas geysers that reach kilometers into the sky." Yunji leaned forward, studying the data. "What kind of resources?" "Enough petroleum to fuel a civilization for 1,000 years, Kaivan said. "Rare earth elements in the crust. Uranium deposits. But we cannot access any of it. A proper environmental suit costs 1 million credits. Even then, workers can only stay on the surface for a few hours before the suit's filters fail." "But humans wouldn't need those suits," Taiyang said slowly. "No," Kaivan agreed. "Based on your tests, humans would need only basic respiratory filters. The petroleum vapors you could breathe directly. The oil you could handle with bare hands." He paused. "My company would be willing to negotiate a contract." After Kaivan left, Taiyang and Yunji sat in silence for a long time. "This could change everything," Yunji finally said. "If humans can work on worlds that other species can't access, we suddenly become very valuable." "It's more than that," Taiyang said. "Think about all those red-marked worlds. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. All rich in resources that the galaxy needs but can't access safely." He pulled up the star map again, looking at all those red dots. "Those aren't death worlds for us. They're just uncomfortable worlds. Smelly worlds. But livable. We evolved on a planet that other species would consider toxic," Yunji said. "Our home world is their nightmare. And their nightmare worlds might be our opportunity." The next day, the Galactic Council held a formal session to review the findings. The chamber was packed with representatives from dozens of species. Taiyang and Yunji presented their data, showing chart after chart of human tolerance to petroleum compounds. When they finished, the chamber erupted in a dozen different languages. Some representatives were excited, seeing economic opportunities. Others were horrified, unable to comprehend how any species could survive such exposure. Vex called for order. "The evidence is clear," he announced. "Humans possess a unique tolerance to hydrocarbon compounds. This opens new possibilities for resource extraction on previously classified worlds." A molten representative oozed forward. "We must ensure proper regulations. If humans can work in these environments, there must be oversight." "Agreed," Vex said. "But the potential benefits are enormous. Worlds we thought were worthless may now be valuable." Taiyang watched the debate continue, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Korath 9, with its oil oceans and toxic air. He was thinking about all the other worlds like it, scattered across the galaxy. Worlds that had been written off as uninhabitable. Humans had spent centuries polluting their own world with petroleum products. They had choked their skies with smog, spilled oil into their oceans, built entire industries around fossil fuels. And now, ironically, that dark history had prepared them for a unique role in the galaxy, the poison that made other species sick. Was just another day at work for humanity. Sick was just another day at work for humanity. Junho stood at the shuttle's window, watching Korath 9 grow larger as they descended. The planet looked sick. Its oceans were black and oily, reflecting the dim light of its orange sun. The continents were dark brown, stained with petroleum deposits. Clouds of yellow-brown vapor swirled through the atmosphere. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Nari said sarcastically from the pilot's seat. "It looks like a pollution disaster," Junho replied. "It is a pollution disaster. A natural one. This whole planet is basically one giant oil spill." Kaivin's voice crackled through the communicator from his ship in orbit. "I remind you that you can still turn back. No one would think less of you." Junho smiled. Everyone would think less of them. This was humanity's big chance to prove they could do something no other species could. If they failed now, or got scared and ran away, humans would lose all credibility. "We're fine," Junho said. Beginning descent. The shuttle pushed through the clouds, and Junho got his first real smell of Korath 9. Even through the ship's filters, he could smell it. Petroleum. Thick and heavy. It reminded him of standing next to a gas station, but 100 times stronger. They landed on a rocky plateau overlooking a sea of crude oil. The landing struts sank slightly into ground that was sticky with tar. Junho and Nari put on their filter masks, simple devices that filtered out particulates and some of the heavier vapors. They weren't fancy. They cost about $50 each back on Earth. "Ready?" Nari asked. "Ready." They opened the shuttle door, and Korath 9's atmosphere rushed in. The smell was overwhelming at first. Gasoline, diesel, tar, natural gas, all mixed together. Junho's eyes watered slightly, but after a few breaths, his body adjusted. It was just air. Smelly air, but breathable. They stepped out onto the surface of a world that would kill most galactic species in minutes. Junho walked to the edge of the plateau and looked out at the oil ocean. Waves of thick, black liquid rolled against the shore. Natural gas geysers erupted in the distance, sending columns of flame hundreds of meters into the sky. The whole planet was a petroleum factory, endlessly producing the compounds that had powered Earth's industrial revolution. "Soil sample," Nari said, kneeling down. She scooped up a handful of dirt. It was sticky and dark, saturated with oil. This would be considered hazardous waste back home. "Here, it's just regular ground." Junho pulled out his scanner and started taking readings. Crude oil deposits, just below the surface. Natural gas pockets everywhere. And deeper down, rare earth elements, uranium, platinum. The planet was incredibly rich. "How's it going down there?" Kaiv asked from orbit. He was watching through cameras on their suits, staying safely away from the toxic surface. "Good," Junho reported. "The readings are better than expected. There's enough oil here to supply the entire sector for centuries. And you are both alive?" "Very much alive," Nari said. She had taken off her filter mask and was breathing the atmosphere directly. "It smells bad, but it's not dangerous. Not to us, anyway." There was a long silence from Kaiven. Junho imagined the Kreeth in his safe, clean ship, trying to comprehend how anyone could survive on Korath 9's surface without a million credit. Environmental suit. They spent 6 hours exploring. They walked along beaches of tar. They climbed hills of oil-soaked rock. They collected samples from a dozen different locations. The whole time, they wore only basic clothes and cheap filter masks. When they finally returned to the shuttle, Junho was tired and covered in oil stains, but fine. He pulled off his mask and wiped his face. "I could live here," he said. "It's not pleasant, but it's livable." Nari nodded. "The temperature is good. Gravity is close to Earth normal. The air is breathable if you don't mind the smell. Yeah, humans could work here long term." They uploaded their report to Kaiden's ship. An hour later, Kaivan called them for a meeting. This time, Minho and Hana were also on the call. They were still on the Tabak runner, but they had been following the Korath 9 expedition closely. "Your report is remarkable," Kaivan said. "You confirm that humans can work on Korath 9 with minimal protection?" "Correct," Juno said. "We'd recommend filter masks for comfort, but they're not strictly necessary. Maybe some protective clothing to keep the oil off our skin. But nothing expensive. Nothing high-tech. My species would require environmental suits costing 1 million credits each," Kaivan said. "These suits would need constant maintenance and filter replacement. Workers could only stay on the surface for a few hours at a time." "We could stay for weeks," Nari said. "Months, maybe, if we set up proper living quarters." Minho leaned forward. "Let's talk business. You need workers who can operate on Korath 9. We're the only species who can do it safely and cheaply. That makes us valuable." "Very valuable," Kaivan agreed reluctantly. "So here's what we want," Minho continued. 60% of all profits from Korath 9. You provide the equipment and initial investment. We provide the labor and expertise. 60%. Kaivan's feathers ruffled. "That is outrageous." "Is it?" Hana asked. "How much would it cost you to extract these resources without us? How much would you spend on environmental suits, on medical care for workers who get sick, on the constant equipment failures? We can do the same work for a fraction of the cost, and we're asking for 60% of profits. You still get 40% of something instead of 0% of nothing." Kaivan was silent for a long moment. "I need to discuss this with my board." "Take your time," Minho said. "But remember, there are other companies who might be interested." The call ended. Junho looked at Nari and grinned. "Do you think he'll agree?" "He has to," Nari said. "We're his only option." 3 days later, Kaivan agreed to the terms. The contract was signed in a ceremony attended by representatives from a dozen species. Humans would have exclusive extraction rights on Korath 9, with a 60-40 profit split in humanity's favor. The news spread quickly through the galaxy. Other corporations started reviewing their surveys of hydrocarbon-rich worlds. Within a week, humanity had received 17 more offers for extraction contracts. JUNHO was put in charge of establishing the first human colony on Korath 9. He oversaw the construction of living quarters, drilling equipment, and refineries. All of it was designed to be simple and cheap, because humans didn't need the expensive protection that other species required. Workers started arriving. Engineers, geologists, refinery operators, all of them excited to be part of this new frontier. They walked out onto Korath 9's surface wearing filter masks and work clothes, ready to do a job that no other species could do. JUNHO stood on that same plateau where he had first landed, watching the colony grow. Prefabricated buildings were going up. Drill rigs were being assembled. Storage tanks were being welded together. All of it happening on a planet that the galaxy had written off as uninhabitable. Hana arrived on the third transport, bringing new equipment designs. She had modified standard drilling rigs to work in the high petroleum environment. Everything was simpler, cheaper, more efficient than the designs other species used. "This is going to make us rich," she said, standing next to Junho. "It's going to make humanity important," Junho corrected. "Rich is nice, but important is better." The first oil started flowing 6 weeks after colony establishment. Huge tankers arrived to haul it away to refineries across the sector. The same oil that would have required hazmat teams a million credit. Equipment for other species was loaded by human workers in basic protective gear. Kaivan visited once, staying safely in orbit. He watched through cameras as human workers walked through puddles of crude oil, breathed air thick with petroleum vapors, and operated heavy machinery in an environment that would be instantly fatal to him. I still do not understand how you survive, he said to Junho. Evolution, Junho replied. We evolved on a world with petroleum. We evolved to tolerate it. You evolved somewhere clean and safe. We evolved somewhere messy and toxic. And now the messy, toxic places are yours. That's right, Junho said, looking out at the oil ocean. The galaxy's trash heaps are our treasure vaults. Within a year, Korath 9 was producing enough petroleum to supply 20 star systems. Human workers lived and worked on the surface, going about their jobs in an environment that nightmares were made of for other species. They complained about the smell, about the oil stains on their clothes, about the constant need to clean their equipment. But they didn't die. They didn't even get sick. Humanity had found its niche in the galactic economy. They were the species that could work in hell and call it a Tuesday. 6 months after Korath 9 started production, Jinwoo received a message that made him nervous. The Galactic Mining Authority wanted to send an inspection team. They wanted to verify that humans weren't using illegal genetic modifications to survive in the toxic environment. It's the Zell Consortium, Myray said, leaning against the door of Jinwoo's office. She was the facility's security chief, and she had a talent for knowing when trouble was coming. They've been complaining to the council for months. They want the Korath 9 contract for themselves. Let them come, Jinwoo said. We have nothing to hide. We're just humans doing what humans do naturally. Maybe. Myray didn't look convinced. But the Zell Consortium is powerful. They don't like that a new species is taking their business. The inspection team arrived 3 days later. There were 5 of them, all wearing environmental suits that probably cost more than Jinwoo's entire yearly salary. They moved slowly and carefully, afraid of every shadow, every puddle of oil. Jinwoo met them at the landing pad, wearing his usual work clothes and a simple filter mask. Welcome to Korath 9, he said cheerfully. The lead inspector, whose translator identified him as Overseer Wrath, stared at Jinwoo like he was a ghost. You are standing in open air, Wrath said. The hydrocarbon concentration here would kill my species in 3 minutes. Yes, I know, Jinwoo said. Would you like a tour of the facility? The inspection took 2 days. The team examined everything, the workers, the equipment, the medical records. They took blood samples, ran genetic tests, and checked for any sign of artificial enhancement. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. Humans were just naturally resistant to petroleum compounds. Wrath seemed frustrated by this. It is impossible, he kept saying. No natural species should have this tolerance. Earth had petroleum seeps for millions of years, Jinwoo explained for the 10th time. We evolved alongside these compounds. It's not mysterious. It's just evolution. I will be filing a report, Wrath said stiffly. The council will review our findings. After the inspection team left, Myray pulled Jinwoo aside. I don't trust them, she said. Something felt wrong. They're just jealous, Jinwoo said. The Zell Consortium lost a valuable contract. They're looking for any excuse to shut us down. Maybe, but keep your eyes open. A week later, things started going wrong. A drill rig mysteriously malfunctioned, destroying 3 months of work. A storage tank developed a leak overnight. Equipment that had been working fine suddenly failed. Myray investigated each incident. The drill rig's computer had been tampered with. The storage tank had been deliberately weakened. Someone was sabotaging the facility. She increased security patrols and installed cameras in key areas. 2 nights later, the cameras caught something. 3 figures in environmental suits moving through the facility in the middle of the night. They weren't part of the regular crew. Myray woke up Jinwoo. We have intruders. They gathered a security team and tracked the intruders to the main refinery building. Myray approached quietly, her team spread out around the building. Through the window, She could see the three figures working on the main processing unit, planting some kind of device. "Stop what you're doing!" Mireille shouted, bursting through the door. The intruders spun around. One of them pulled out a tool and threw it at Mireille. She dodged, and the tool clattered against the wall. The three intruders ran for the exit, moving awkwardly in their heavy environmental suits. Mireille's team cut them off. There was a brief struggle, and during the fight, one of the intruders' suits was damaged. A crack appeared in the helmet, and Kareth 9's toxic atmosphere started seeping in. The intruder immediately collapsed, gasping and choking. His skin turned purple. White foam appeared at his mouth. He was dying. Mireille made a split-second decision. Get him to the clean room, now. She and Jinwoo grabbed the intruder, each taking an arm. The alien was heavy in his environmental suit, and he was thrashing weakly, suffocating in the toxic air. They dragged him through the facility, their own lungs breathing the same air that was killing him. The clean room was a sealed chamber with filtered air, kept pure for medical emergencies. They hauled the intruder inside and slammed the door shut. The room systems kicked in, scrubbing the petroleum vapors from the air. Slowly, the intruder stopped choking. His color returned to normal. He lay on the floor, breathing heavily, alive but barely conscious. The other two intruders had been captured by Mireille's team. All three were searched, and their identities revealed. They worked for the Zell Consortium. Jinwoo contacted the Galactic Mining Authority immediately. "We have captured 3 agents of the Zell Consortium attempting sabotage," he reported. "They planted explosives in our refinery. One of them was injured during capture. We saved his life." The response from the authority was immediate. Inspectors arrived within hours. News crews followed. The galaxy watched as the evidence was presented. The sabotage devices, the damaged equipment, the confession from one of the agents who admitted they were sent to make the facility fail. The Zell Consortium tried to deny everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. Their reputation was destroyed. Companies across the galaxy canceled contracts with them. The council imposed massive fines, but the bigger story was what Jinwoo and Mireille had done. They had saved the life of someone who had tried to destroy their facility. Mireille had dragged the dying alien through air that was toxic to him but breathable to her. She had risked injury to save someone who was trying to hurt her. "Why did you save him?" a reporter asked during the press conference. Mireille looked at the camera. "Because letting someone die when you can save them isn't right. It doesn't matter who they are or what they did. If you can help, you help." The interview was broadcast across the galaxy. Humans had already earned respect for their ability to work in toxic environments. Now they earned respect for their character. Offers started coming in from everywhere. Not just for extraction work on hydrocarbon worlds, but for environmental cleanup. There were dozens of planets where industrial accidents had created petroleum spills. These spills were catastrophic for the species living there, requiring expensive cleanup that took decades. But to humans, a petroleum spill was just a messy job site. A molten colony world called Vel-3 had suffered a massive oil spill 5 years earlier. An orbital platform had crashed, dumping millions of gallons of crude oil into their main ocean. The molten couldn't go near it without dying. Cleanup crews in environmental suits were making slow progress at enormous cost. Jinwoo received a request from the Vel-3 government. Could humans help? He sent a team of 20 workers. They arrived on Vel-3, looked at the oil spill that had traumatized an entire species, and got to work. They used booms and skimmers, techniques that had been developed on Earth a century earlier. They scooped up the oil with their bare hands when needed. They walked through contaminated areas that would have required hazmat teams for other species. The cleanup that would have taken the molten 30 years took the human team 6 months. The Vel-3 government was so Grateful they offered humanity a permanent trade agreement. Other worlds with pollution problems started calling. Humans became the galaxy's cleanup crew, the species you called when you had a toxic mess that no one else could handle. Jinwoo stood on the landing pad at Korath 9, watching another transport arrive with new workers. The facility had grown massively in the past year. More rigs, more refineries, more storage tanks. And now they were expanding into cleanup work as well. Mireille joined him, looking up at the orange sky. "Do you ever think about how weird this is?" she asked. "We're making a fortune off of stuff that most species consider poison. Earth's history prepared us for this," Jinwoo said. "We spent 200 years pumping petroleum out of the ground, burning it, spilling it, building our entire civilization around it. We poisoned our own planet with the stuff. And now that history, that mistake, has become our greatest advantage. We turned our weakness into a strength." "Exactly." Jinwoo smiled. "The galaxy sees petroleum as death. We see it as just another resource. That difference is making us invaluable." A worker walked by, covered head to toe in crude oil, complaining about needing a shower. To him, it was just another day at work. To the galaxy, it was impossible. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but as the species that could survive in places where others couldn't. The species that could turn poison into profit, catastrophe into opportunity. The species that could work in hell and call it home. 5 years after the incident at Kepler 7 station, Minho stood on the bridge of his new flagship. It wasn't the old Tayback runner anymore. That ship had been retired to a museum, honored as the vessel where humanity's petroleum tolerance was first discovered. Now Minho commanded the Pioneer, a massive transport ship that carried workers and equipment to humanity's growing network of colonies. He looked at the navigation display. 12 worlds now had human settlements. 12 worlds that other species had marked as uninhabitable. Korath 9 was the first and largest, but there were others. Taral 6 with its ammonia hydrocarbon rain. Bexel 2 with its methane seas. Tovin Prime with its benzene atmosphere. All of them were home to humans now. Hana was still his chief engineer, though she spent most of her time these days designing new equipment for the various colonies. She walked onto the bridge carrying a datapad. "We're approaching Taral 6, she said. "The colony administrator wants to show us the new housing complex. How many people are living there now?" 5,000. Double what it was last year. Minho shook his head in amazement. 5,000 humans living on a planet where the rain could kill most galactic species. Children were being born there. Families were building lives there. It had become home. The Pioneer entered orbit around Taral 6. The planet looked beautiful from space, covered in purple clouds and green oceans. But Minho knew those oceans were toxic soup, and those clouds dropped rain that was part ammonia, part petroleum compounds. A shuttle took them down to the surface. The colony was called New Bizin, and it looked like a small Earth city transplanted to an alien world. Buildings, streets, parks, schools. People walked around in light reindeer, not because the rain was dangerous, but because it smelled bad and stained clothes. A young woman met them at the landing pad. Her name was Hyan, and she was 16 years old. She had been born on Taral 6, part of the first generation of humans to grow up on a hydrocarbon world. "Welcome to New Bizin," Hyan said cheerfully. She wasn't wearing any protective gear at all, just regular clothes. Rain was falling, that toxic, ammonia-laced rain, and she didn't even seem to notice it. "You grew up here?" Hannah asked. "Yeah, I've never even been to Earth. This is home." Hyan gestured at the city around them. "My parents came here when I was a baby. They work at the refinery." As they walked through the city, Minho noticed something interesting. The people here moved differently than people on space stations or Earth colonies. They were completely comfortable in the environment. They didn't hurry through the rain or avoid puddles. One kid was actually playing in a puddle of contaminated water, splashing around like it was a normal swimming pool. "We get a lot of tourists," Hyam said. "Well, not tourists who come down to the surface. They stay in orbit and watch through cameras. They can't believe people actually live here." A shuttle was parked nearby, and through its windows, Minho could see a group of alien diplomats watching the colony. They wore expressions of horror and fascination. One of them saw Hyam walking in the toxic rain and made a gesture that his translator couldn't quite interpret. But the meaning was clear enough. Shocked, Hyam waved at them cheerfully, not understanding why they looked so terrified. That evening, Minho attended a meeting at the Galactic Council chambers. Yuna, humanity's ambassador, had called him to attend a special session. The chamber was packed with representatives from dozens of species. Yuna stood at the podium, projecting an image of humanity's 12 colony worlds. 5 years ago, these worlds were considered worthless, she said. No economic value because extraction costs were too high. Now they produce 17% of the galaxy's petroleum supply, 8% of its rare earth elements, and 12% of its uranium. All because humans can work there safely, added Dex, who had become a close ally of humanity over the years. We're not just extracting resources, Yuna continued. We're also cleaning up pollution. Human teams have responded to 37 environmental disasters across the galaxy. Petroleum spills that would have taken other species decades to clean up, we handle in months. Chemical leaks that are lethal to most species, we treat as routine industrial accidents. A Kreeth representative stood up. Humanity has become essential to the galactic economy. We acknowledge this, but we must also ensure proper regulations are in place. Agreed, Yuna said. Which is why we're proposing the Hydrocarbon Worlds Treaty. This treaty would establish clear guidelines for human operations on toxic worlds, ensure fair profit sharing, and create safety standards for our workers. The treaty passed with overwhelming support. It formalized what everyone already knew. Humans were the only species that could safely work on hydrocarbon-rich worlds, and the galaxy needed them. After the session, Taiyang and Yunji found Minho in the observation lounge. They had both become senior advisors to the council, helping other species understand human biology and capabilities. "Remember when we were doing those tests?" Yunji said, looking out at the stars. "When alien scientists couldn't believe we could breathe petroleum vapors. Now it's normal," Taiyang added. "There are human children who think ammonia hydrocarbon rain is just regular weather. A whole generation growing up on worlds that would be death traps for other species. We've adapted," Minho said. "Not just biologically, but culturally. These worlds aren't nightmares to us anymore. They're just different, challenging, maybe, but livable." Back on Korath 9, Junho was showing a group of alien engineers around the facility. They stayed in their environmental suits, of course, but they were fascinated by how the humans worked. One engineer asked to see the residential area. Junho took them to the living quarters. Families lived here, in apartments that would cost millions to build for other species, but were relatively cheap for humans. Kids played in yards where oil seeped naturally from the ground. People barbecued food outside, breathing air that was 30% hydrocarbon vapor. "This is normal life for you?" One engineer asked through his translator. "This is home," Junho said simply. One of the most remarkable changes came in education. Universities across the galaxy started offering programs in extreme environment engineering, specifically designed for human students. Young humans could now study how to extract resources from toxic worlds, how to build colonies in hostile atmospheres, how to clean up chemical disasters. It was a career path that simply didn't exist before humans joined the galactic community. Jinwoo was teaching one such class via holographic link. Students from Earth, Mars, and 3 colony worlds attended his lecture on safety protocols for petroleum extraction. Remember, he told them, what's safe for us is deadly for most other species. When you're working on a joint project with other species, you need to be aware of that difference. You might be comfortable standing in a puddle of crude oil, but your Kreeth coworker could die from the fumes alone. A student raised her hand. Professor, do you think we'll ever find a species that's more resistant to petroleum than we are? Jinwoo considered the question. Maybe. The galaxy is huge. But right now, we're unique. And that uniqueness has value. It's given humanity a place in the galactic community that we might not have had otherwise. Mireille had been promoted to head of security for all human operations in the sector. She traveled between worlds, training security teams and establishing protocols. On a visit to Taral 6, she met Hyan again. The girl was older now, 17, and applying to universities. I want to study xenobiology, Hyan said. I want to understand why we're different. Why we can live here and others can't. You might find the answer, Mireille said. Or you might discover that there are other species out there with similar adaptations. The galaxy's full of surprises. Maybe. But right now, we're special. And I want to understand why. Yuna gave a speech at the anniversary celebration of humanity's first galactic contact. Representatives from every major species attended. She stood at the podium and looked out at the diverse crowd. When humans first joined the galactic community, we wondered what we could offer, she said. We weren't the strongest species. We weren't the smartest. We didn't have the best technology. But we had something unique, a tolerance for environments that others found lethal. She brought up images of the 12 colony worlds. We turned worlds that were written off as worthless into productive colonies. We cleaned up disasters that threatened entire civilizations. We found value in places where others saw only death. And we learned something important. Every species has unique strengths. Every species has evolved to survive in specific conditions. For humanity, those conditions just happen to be messy, toxic, and soaked in petroleum. We evolved on a world that others would call a nightmare. And that prepared us perfectly for our role in the galaxy. The speech received a standing ovation from representatives of every species. Later, Minho, Hana, Taiyang, Yoonji, Junho, Nari, and Yuna all gathered for a private dinner. They were the pioneers, the ones who had been there from the beginning. To petroleum, Minho said, raising his glass. The poison that made us valuable. To evolution, Taiyang added. For preparing us in ways we never expected. To opportunity, Junho said. For being found in the strangest places.